You walk past someone collapsed on the sidewalk. 20 people are standing around them. Nobody moves. You don't move either. You tell yourself someone else will call for help. You tell yourself you don't want to overreact. You keep walking. But here's the part nobody tells you. The more people standing there, the less likely anyone helps at all. That's not bad luck. That's not coincidence. That's a switch in your brain that flips the moment you realize you're not alone. This isn't a story about cruelty. It's a story about wiring so old your body still runs on it without asking your permission. In March of 1964, a young woman named Kitty Genovese was attacked outside her apartment building in Queens, New York. The attack lasted over half an hour. A newspaper report claimed 38 neighbors heard her cries and did nothing. The story spread across the country within days. How could that many people listen to someone screaming for help and just stay inside? Decades later, journalists and historians went back and re-examined the case more carefully. The real picture turned out to be messier than the headline. Fewer people actually witnessed the full attack than the original story claimed. At least one neighbor did call the police. The myth of 38 silent witnesses was, in part, a story that grew bigger with every retelling. But here's the strange thing. Even though the most dramatic version of that one night was exaggerated, the underlying question it raised turned out to be completely real. Two psychologists wanted to find out whether groups really could make people less likely to help a stranger in trouble. Their names were John Darley and Bibb Latane. And what they found wasn't about bad people, or even about one tragic night in Queens. It was about a hidden rule buried in how groups think, a rule you carry with you right now whether you've ever heard of Kitty Genovese or not. They built an experiment. A college student sat alone in a room talking to other students through an intercom, supposedly for a casual group discussion. Partway through, one voice on the intercom started having what sounded like a seizure, gasping, choking, calling for help. Some participants believed they were the only other person who could hear it. Others believed there were several other people listening too. Here's the twist that should be impossible. When participants thought they were the only witness, almost all of them rushed to help within a minute. But when they believed 4 or 5 other people were also listening, far fewer helped at all. And the ones who did help took nearly 3 times as long to act. Nothing about the emergency had changed. The voice was just as desperate. The choking was just as real. The only thing that changed was a number in their head. How many other people might be hearing this too? Darley and Latane called this diffusion of responsibility. Translate that into plain language, and it just means this. When more people are around, the weight of responsibility doesn't disappear. It splits. And once it splits enough times, it can feel so small that no single person feels like it's actually theirs to carry. You've felt a version of this. A group project where everyone assumes someone else is handling the hard part. A group chat where a question goes unanswered because surely someone more qualified will reply. Nobody decided to be lazy. The responsibility just got divided until it felt like it belonged to no one in particular. But there's a second force running underneath that one, and it's even older. Imagine you're standing in a crowd and something strange happens. A loud noise, a flash of smoke. What's the very first thing you do? You don't act. You look at the people around you. Their faces tell you whether to panic or stay calm. If they look relaxed, you relax. If everyone else looks relaxed while you're internally panicking, you start to doubt your own read of the situation. Psychologists call this social proof, and it evolved for a brilliant reason. For most of human history, the people around you usually knew something you didn't. Following the group kept you alive far more often than it got you killed. Think about the last time you walked into a restaurant with no posted hours and saw a line of people waiting outside, even though the door looked unlocked. You probably didn't walk straight in and check for yourself. You joined the line, or you assumed there was a reason for it. That same shortcut, trust the crowd's read over your own, is the exact mechanism that goes quiet and dangerous the moment the situation flips from a restaurant line to an actual emergency. Darley and Latane tested this too, in a follow-up experiment using smoke instead of a fake seizure. They had participants sit in a waiting room filling out a survey while smoke quietly began pouring through a vent. Alone in the room, the vast majority of people got up, noticed, and reported it almost immediately. But when the room was filled with other participants who had secretly been told to stay calm and keep filling out their survey, something strange happened. People sat there. Smoke filled the room until they could barely see the paper in front of them, and they kept writing. Not because they didn't notice, because everyone else's calm face became evidence that there was nothing to worry about. Some participants later admitted, when asked why they hadn't reacted, that they assumed it must be steam from a vent or air conditioning fumes or something harmless that the calm people around them clearly understood, and they didn't. Their own senses were screaming that something was wrong. The room full of calm strangers overruled their senses anyway. Stack those two forces together and you get something powerful, and a little terrifying. A crowd doesn't just split the responsibility to act. It also tells you second by second whether action is even necessary, and both of those signals get stronger the more people are standing there. So why would evolution build a brain this way? It sounds like a flaw. It looks like cowardice. But step back into the world your ancestors actually lived in. For nearly all of human history, you didn't live alone. You lived in a small band of people who depended on each other constantly. In that world, reading the group wasn't a weakness. It was survival software. If the group froze, freezing was usually the safer bet. If the group fled, fleeing usually meant something real was coming. Your ancestors, who paid close attention to the crowd's reaction rather than charging in alone every time, lived long enough to pass that instinct down to you. There's another piece to this that anthropologists point to as well. In a band of 20 or 30 people, responsibility was never actually ambiguous. Everyone knew everyone's name, everyone's role, everyone's relationship to everyone else. If someone needed help, there was rarely any real confusion about who should act. The closest relative acted, the strongest hunter acted. The person who happened to already be standing right there acted. Diffusion of responsibility had almost nowhere to hide, because the group itself was small enough that responsibility was already assigned by default. The problem is that instinct was built for bands of 20 or 30 people who all knew each other's names. It was never built for cities. It was never built for subway platforms packed with total strangers, or comment sections filled with people who will never meet face to face. The wiring is ancient, the crowd size is brand new, and the gap between the two is exactly where the bystander effect lives. Here's where the story gets even stranger, because for decades, psychologists assumed the original lab findings simply scaled up to real life. More witnesses, less help, every single time. Then, in 2007, a researcher named Mark Levine, working with colleagues Peter Manning and Alan Collins, decided to test that assumption using something Darley and Latane never had access to: real footage. Hundreds of hours of actual security camera recordings of real public conflicts and emergencies. What they found complicated the simple story. In real-world footage, bystanders intervened far more often than the lab experiments predicted, and in many cases, having more people present actually increased the odds that someone stepped in. The difference seemed to come down to identity. When bystanders saw themselves as part of a shared group with the victim, even something as loose as both being fans of the same team, intervention rates climbed sharply. So the freeze isn't a fixed law of human nature. It's a default setting, and defaults can be overridden the instant a crowd of strangers starts to feel less like strangers and more like your people. Which brings you back to right now, to a version of that frozen crowd you've almost certainly stood in yourself, just with a screen instead of a sidewalk. Someone posts that they're struggling. Someone live streams something going wrong. The view count climbs into the thousands, and you assume, somewhere in the back of your mind, that with that many people watching, somebody else has surely already called someone, already said something, already done the responsible thing. Researchers studying online behavior have found this exact pattern playing out at a scale Darley and Latane never could have tested in a lab. Comment sections under posts asking for real help often get thousands of views and almost no direct responses because every single viewer runs the same silent calculation. Surely, with this many eyes on the screen, Someone better positioned than me has already acted. The number in the corner of the screen does the same job that the row of calm faces did in that smoke-filled waiting room decades ago. Phones have added a strange new twist on top of the old one. Filming an emergency can feel like a form of action, even when it changes nothing about the outcome. Holding up a phone gives your hands something to do and gives your brain a sense that you're contributing, documenting, bearing witness. But a video uploaded after the fact helps no one in the moment it was needed. That assumption has a name now too, and you already know what it is, because you just learned the mechanics of how it works inside your own skull. The crowd isn't the thing standing between someone and help. The number in your head is, and the moment you stop asking how many other people are watching and start asking what you would do if you were the only one, the switch flips back the other way.